Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for this important discussion. And I'll mention at the onset that we are using Zoom's closed captioning feature, so some words may be lost in translation. My name is Javier Palomares, and I have the privilege of leading the United States Hispanic Business Council in advocating for the 4.8 million Hispanic-owned firms in this country that collectively contribute over $800 billion to our American economy every year. At the USHBC, our mission is to elevate the voice of America's small business. We want to mainstream the story of America's Hispanic community and change the narrative that has for too long defined our people. In fact, we are collaborators, we are business builders, we are job creators and taxpayers, we are Americans. That is why at the USHBC, while we're proud to advocate for men and women who happen to be of Hispanic descent, we never forget that we are first and foremost American businesses. And every tax bill we pay, every job we create, every product we manufacture, and every service we provide goes to benefit our American economy. Around here, the only thing we're prouder of than being Hispanic is being American. At the USHBC, we remain committed to ensuring that candidates on both sides of the aisle have an opportunity to directly address the concerns of our small business owners. We want to bridge the gap between business owners and our elected officials, because we have seen far too often how congressional theory is simply out of touch with the reality of our day-to-day lives. As a bipartisan organization, we are delighted to host two separate conversations with both candidates, as the Commonwealth deserves the opportunity to make an informed decision before they cast their votes in this critical election. To be clear, at the USHBC, we advocate on behalf of the people and policies that support our American small business community. Town halls allow each candidate their own individual opportunity to carefully address the issues small business owners are facing in today's economy and in this very difficult political environment. In preparation for our conversation today, we have surveyed the Pennsylvania small business community and gathered questions on critical topics that are impacting our operations. With us this morning is Pennsylvania's serving Lieutenant Governor, the Honorable John Fetterman. In his current role, Mr. Fetterman championed progressive policies and ran on issues such as equality, racial justice, and ending the war on drugs. Mr. Fetterman previously served as the mayor of Braddock, Pennsylvania, for over a decade and focused on rebuilding the economy of that once booming steel town. As a graduate from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, he applied his learned skills to support building out a GED program in Braddock, because he believes that education is the best way to minimize barriers to generational upward mobility, a passion that was developed during his time with AmeriCorps. Born and raised in Pennsylvania, the Lieutenant Governor still resides in Braddock with his wife, Giselle, and their three young children, Carl, Gracie, and August. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome the Honorable John Fetterman. Welcome, Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here with you today. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I'm delighted to having this conversation and really just let's, just answer these very, very important questions.
Thank you, sir. Let me kick us right off. First, a general question. Now, this question comes from Norman Bristol Colon, who has for decades been a leader in Pennsylvania's Hispanic community and an advisor and counselor to all of us. Without a doubt, right now, our nation is facing a very divisive political environment. We need elected officials and political leaders to step up and understand how to reach across the aisle for the sake of the American people. We need the kind of leadership that will put people before partisan politics. If elected, how would you plan to be part of the solution of this sticky situation we find ourselves in today?
Absolutely. And it's absolutely a question that's critical because if we can't work together on anything, then we're not going to get anything good done. And I just want to just say, anecdotally, I mean, it's true that everyone in my families are actually Republicans. So this idea, like I just like to say, yeah, I got some support from Republicans for sure, in my family. And I understand, and I do not ever assume that anyone, if they have an R after their name, that means they're an enemy or there's not something that we can't have common ground on or anything. I will be delighted to sit down and work out any kind of policy or any kind of issues to get something done that I believe is in the best interest of Pennsylvanians. And that means whether it's infrastructure, if that means in doing any other kind of incentives to enhance the community business environment here in Pennsylvania. I mean, there's plenty of things, investment in education, and I'd be delighted to. And but I also will say that there are some things that I don't believe are they're just not a non-negotiable on some of these issues. True. And for example, unfortunately, again and again, immigration, for example, is demagogued and it's turned into a very toxic thing and that's something I reject. And this idea, I stand with that idea, and I always believe that immigration is America, and I would never just turn my back on those kind of like core values as well. True. So to wherever common ground is, that is always the place where I will meet anybody.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. And I'm glad you mentioned immigration. I'll come back to that here in a while. I know it's one of our questions. In terms of Pennsylvania's economy, when compared to the rest of the United States, the Pennsylvania economy is ranked 37th out of 50. Additionally, Pennsylvania ranked 42nd in non-farm employment growth. The state's median household income is $73,000 and has decreased for the second consecutive year, while the poverty rate has increased for the second consecutive year and now stands at 12%. Clearly, your economy is in a downward spiral. So the question is, sir, where would you begin to turn around the Quaker State's economy?
Sure. And absolutely. And just talk about, we want to acknowledge, true, that there more needs to be done. And for example, as mayor of a community that was left behind, it is a forgotten community. And I know there's ones all across Pennsylvania that we must have to make increasing kinds of investments and focus on, quite honestly. For example, in Pennsylvania as well, the city of my birth, Reading is another issue, another community in Pennsylvania that needs more kind of investment and more kinds of focus, too, because that is definitely one of the Hispanic centers of all in Pennsylvania, and it also, unfortunately, is also suffering from a higher poverty rate that must be addressed through. And I also think we need to start making more things right here in Pennsylvania, and more of a focus on making more things here in Pennsylvania and in America too, as well too. And again, I'm not here to use this venue to take shots at my opponent, but I just would want to point out that with my opponent decided when he was going and where he was going to produce his merchandise, under the Oz label, was all made in China. And they didn't, choose to make investments here and in either Pennsylvania or America in those kind of merchandise. I think we need to make more manufacturing here in Pennsylvania and in the nation. And those are more jobs with dignity and more family sustaining jobs right here in Pennsylvania and in America. I believe we should be having more tax cuts on working families as well, true. And also, I think we have to, again, this is like a core value of mine, is we need to raise the minimum wage, so we can't have anyone assume that I believe that with all work, there's dignity, and I believe all paycheck must have dignity as well, true. And I think a living wage is absolutely critical as well.
Okay, so if I hear you correctly, more manufacturing, more investment in Pennsylvania, and tax cuts for the working families in Pennsylvania.
Absolutely. That is absolutely. Yes. And yes.
And let me keep going with issues specific to Pennsylvania. When compared to states in the Northeast, Pennsylvania's stagnating population isn't really that bad when compared to Northeastern states. But when compared to the rest of the United States, it wound up near the bottom of the list, ranking 47th out of 50 in cumulative domestic migration, which means that there's more people leaving your state than there are people coming in, with the exception of a small revival of sorts in the northeastern part of the state in Allentown, thanks to more Hispanics moving to that part of the state. But other than that, the outlook remains bleak. So the question is, sir, what will you do to attract more people to the Commonwealth and prevent young people from leaving?
Sure. Again, I just would return to the idea that we need to create a more vibrant kind of economy that would attract folks is well true. And, working with to the point of the earlier question, working with across the aisle and create a more hospitable environment for businesses, working in a bipartisan approach to make sure that we create more and more and to entice more and more companies to relocate here. And I know for a fact that that is something that is a focus for my governor that I've worked with, but we can always continue to do better job on that as well. True. But we need to also invest in a lot of these communities to enhance with the amenities and the public schools, and to make sure that we have a state that's actually open to and hospitable to immigration and other kinds of populations here in Pennsylvania as well too, and having more progressive and forward-looking kinds of policies to make people feel more welcome and feel more encouraged to move here.
Let's widen the lens a bit and look at things from a national perspective, because of course, as a United States Senator, you'd be voting on things that are impactful, not only to Pennsylvania, but ultimately would impact the rest of the United States. So in that context, let me ask a couple of questions that have to do more with national issues. And specifically our nation's energy policy. It's important to note that the USHBC does not refute the need to transition to clean energy. We think this is a good objective, and we should continue our efforts towards decarbonization. But with that said, we believe the current administration has gone too far, too fast in our transition to a clean energy state. Now, this is important to us for two main reasons, sir. First, Hispanics represent 30% of the employment in the energy sector or the directly impacted industries like transportation, construction, manufacturing, and agriculture. In fact, there are 9 million Hispanics whose jobs are negatively impacted by this overly aggressive transition. The second reason we care about this so much, as the price of energy goes up, so does everything else. For example, the price of transportation, warehousing, manufacturing, cleaning products, medicine, cosmetics, plastics, rubber, farming fertilizer, asphalt, even the question for our business owners, sir, is that for every dollar we invest or we spend on higher energy costs, that's a dollar we can't invest back into our businesses, creating new jobs and driving the American economy. So the question is, how would you help alleviate this critical situation for our small business community?
Yeah, I fundamentally believe that we should be always making more energy right here in America. I believe we have energy security as one of our top issues. And we certainly can never be at mercy at a community, excuse me, at a country like Russia. And I've always kind of walked the line here as a Democrat, that sometimes we'll put some Democrats at odds. But the truth is that Democrats always must be honest about energy security and how critical it is to have energy security. We cannot power a strong American economy if we're not have the energy that we need to power it, as well as also afford it as well. But also Republicans must be honest about that climate change is a very real thing, as you also said. But I also believe that this idea that we can somehow, go to all windmills or solar panels just is not. It's just not the truth. Typical or traditional kinds of energy sources are critical, and they need to be part and will be parts of decades from again and again. We have to invest in as well too, because one, it does create jobs, but also true in my own community in Pennsylvania. About 40% of Pennsylvania's electricity comes from natural gas. To pretend that that's not easy to just go over in 1 or 2 years over, just it's not. We must be honest about that, and it's a transition. And I believe it's something that I absolutely subscribe to. And sometimes even the far wing of my party will say we can do, all green right of town yesterday. And that's just not realistic. I mean, we have to be honest about that. I do believe that it is going to be a transition that is critical. But I do believe that it has to be realistic. It has to be with security, and it has to be with economy. So we're able to afford the energy that we're producing, and we have to be able to just make sure we're making it within our borders to make sure we have actual security in that.
It turns out you're speaking to a Democrat who believes, as you do, that the transition is important, but it should be done so in a timely fashion, in a strategic fashion, in a sustainable fashion. In the meantime, we need to actually increase our traditional energy production. And I think if I hear you correctly, you're actually agreeing with Energy Secretary Granholm, who said, and I quote, "We need to learn how to walk and chew gum at the same time." It's a tricky transition, but I appreciate that. I do have a follow-up question, and that's because there's been so much debate about your position on this issue. There's been plenty of debate surrounding your position, in fact, on fracking. That debate has been fueled by the fact that in 2016, during your first run for the Senate, you were a vocal critic of the fracking industry, and you called it, and I quote, I believe, a stain on Pennsylvania. Then in 2018, you said, and I quote, "I don't support fracking at all, and I never have. Can you tell us with a simple yes or no, if elected, sir, will you support fracking?"
I absolutely would support fracking, and I have, I have at times had concerns about environmental issues as well too. And for example, they were putting the producing water into the rivers, and they weren't having the appropriate levels of treatments. And now the laws have changed. I believe that I think is an important change. And again, I support fracking in that sense. And I absolutely do support fracking, and especially now, particularly in light of the Ukraine war, that we must absolutely have energy kind of security, and fracking is a part of that economy here as well. Absolutely.
I'm sorry, sir, just one more follow-up question on this topic. What is your position on the permitting reform that's been proposed by fellow Democrat Joe Manchin that would streamline the approval process for critical infrastructure projects like transmission lines and pipelines that would be built in the northeastern United States and including in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, it would have, to me, it's more of a situational kind of positioning. As long as it's not going through residual areas and parts, like in Pennsylvania example, there was in kind of residual areas, as long as it's done in a very safe and an environmental kind of ways, I think I absolutely would to support that. But there have been some projects here in Pennsylvania that were done in a way where there were massive fines that incurred, and that wasn't being done in the proper way. As long as it's done in a very environmentally sound and an area that does not be run through residential neighborhoods, and it's not in any kind of danger to the population, I can support that and open to that as well.
So you would support Manchin's proposal if it was done in an environmentally responsible fashion?
Yes, absolutely. And there was challenges here in Pennsylvania, and that's being addressed. So I believe it's walking the line on that.
Absolutely. Let's move on to big tech and regulation of big technology. Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar has proposed antitrust legislation referred to as Bill S-2992 that specifically targets Apple, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and Meta. While well-intentioned, we believe this legislation has unintended consequences that would be detrimental to the small business community and disproportionately harmful for Hispanic-owned small businesses. Our small businesses have come to rely on the tools and services that these platforms offer, and they have been transformational for our community. If passed, this legislation could result in disproportionate losses for our community. It's important to note that 36% of Hispanic-owned small businesses make most or all of their revenue online, compared to only 16% of non-Hispanic businesses. This is yet another example of how congressional theory is simply out of touch with reality. So the question is, sir, if called upon to vote on this legislation, how would you vote?
Well, I really think obviously small business is critical to Pennsylvania. And I think it's like we need to protect and make sure that those resources, they need. But I also do believe Big Tech, a corporation does need a regulation, but it has to be smart. And I was actually honored to serve and did an event with the senator just a couple of days ago. And she's somebody that I would absolutely want to sit down and I want to address some of the concerns that your community would have on all that as well too. I would actually read it carefully and would absolutely work hand in hand with all of your community to discuss the concerns and make sure that that voice is heard as part of crafting that and working to the final bill before it would make a law. It would never be anything I would support without, again, of course, visiting in with all of your community to make sure that and what makes sense and making sure that your voice is heard very clearly as part of that deliberations.
Thank you, sir. Back to immigration. Our organization has long been a proponent of immigration reform as an economic imperative. We look at it from an economic perspective because we know immigrants are an important and a necessary component of a healthy American economy. Case in point, the world's most renowned corporations, including AT&T, Bank of America, eBay, Google, Nordstrom, Toyota, Tesla, and all the way up to Verizon, were all started in America and all started by an immigrant. In Pennsylvania, there are over 60,000 farm workers who support the agricultural industry and help make the Keystone State an industry leader in mushroom production. This industry alone supports nearly 9,000 jobs and contributes $1.1 billion to your economy. Yet most of your agricultural workers are undocumented. On a national level, our dependence on foreign-born workers has never changed. While the political dialogue continues, it's clear to us that neither party has the political courage to fix this thorny issue. So the question is, sir, if you were elected, what's your view on this, and what would you do to revamp our immigration system?
You referenced a lot of great things that were all started by an immigrant. And my family has been started with an immigrant as well too. My wife Giselle immigration has enriched my life beyond cost, and it is something that is a very near and dear value in my heart. In fact, I believe immigration is what makes America America, and I believe it needs to be comprehensive, compassionate, and bipartisan. This law, you mentioned in your very first question was, are working with the other side. That's an issue that unfortunately the other side doesn't, really want to engage. We must be compassionate and we must be comprehensive, and there is something very compatible with a strong border, but it also has to be compassionate as well, true. And I refuse and I reject in the strongest terms about any kind of harsh or divisive or even, quite frankly, just racist kind of language, discussing about immigration before, and, you talk about the liberty of statute has never had an inscription inside that said, send your tired Huddard masses and put them on a bus and turn them into a cheap political stunt. It's about having a real and serious conversation about immigration. It's going to require a bipartisan solution, and I would meet at any table with the Republican to have, again, a common sense, a compassionate new solution on immigration.
So you would work with Republican counterparts to find common sense, comprehensive, and compassionate solution.
Absolutely, and realistic, true. Immigration is actually an engine in economic development as well, true.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Crime, back to Pennsylvania, crime. Violent crime is a top concern for Pennsylvania voters leading into this election. A recent statistic shows that violent crime rates in Pennsylvania rose 27% this year alone. And gun violence is the top ranked crime that concerns the people of the Commonwealth. From a small business perspective, crime rates affect the business's bottom line, as owners are forced to consider the safety of their employees, their personal safety, customers, and the overall survival of their enterprise. So the question is, what's your plan to lower crime rates and support the efforts of local law enforcement in Pennsylvania?
Of course. Absolutely. I'm actually a Democrat that I'm running on my record on crime. And that's the reason why I ran for mayor the very first time in my career. Two of my students were killed, and I decided I wanted to do something to get that. And to me, it's a very personal issue. I ran for mayor to become mayor, to work with our police department, to actually fund the police and work with them, but also with the community as well, too, at the same time, and make sure that we create a solution. And that's exactly what we did. We were able to stop the killings and the murders for 5.5 years during my time as mayor. That had never been accomplishing before or since during my time. And again, we did that by partnering with the police and also other kinds of agencies as well, true, and understanding that at the core of any strategy to address gun violence, the police are at the center of that. You need to have them bought in, and you have to have the community bought in, and working together, it's the most successful way to make it work. And to build the kind of relationship is critical on that. And I also was, again, very hands-on on that, was on patrols myself with our own police. And I also want to point out that my opponent has never done anything about crime, never created any issue about it, making it personal, never stopped or was involved in crime in any way at all. And all they did was put a plan up on his website about 2 days ago to pretend that he's something that was been anything meaningful or something he was engaging against at any part of their career.
Thank you, sir. On the funding gap for Hispanic-owned businesses, our Hispanic entrepreneurs represent the fastest growing segment of the small business community, starting new ventures at a rate of 3 to 1 when compared to the general market. This has fueled strong need for external financing for Hispanic entrepreneurs. In fact, according to a small business credit survey, Hispanic business owners applied for external financing at higher rates than any other ethnic group in America. That said, the levels of financing provided do not align with our demand. According to Stanford research, only 20% of Hispanic-owned companies asking for more than $100,000 were approved, compared to 50% for non-Hispanic-owned businesses. So the question is, what can be done to influence lenders to fix this disparity and help meet the needs of rapidly growing Hispanic-owned businesses in this country?
Sure. Again, that is an appalling statistic, and that needs to change. And I'll be absolutely to make sure I fight for those kind of investments and those kind of resources. And my own wife is a member of that community. Started an incubator that has actually helped to create businesses of minority communities, jobs right in our own community. And that is a value near and dear, within our family as well too. And we're going to make sure we would fight to create the kind of community federal dollars and the kind of investments and grants, and also hold to make sure that the percentage of approvals is become more in line with where it should have always been to begin with.
Thank you, sir. My closing question. As we bring the conversation to a close, I have a question that I would personally like to ask you, if I can do that. Being a senator has always been a tough job, but in today's political environment, it's nearly an impossible job. We all know there's been plenty of discussion regarding the status of your health. Most would have taken time to recuperate, to be with family, to get better. And I don't want to talk about the condition itself. There's been enough talk about that. What I would like to understand is, what is it that keeps you in this race, sir?
I think it's the love of my state, the love of my nation, and I think the direction that we could go in if we don't step up and fight for that as well too. And I'm actually delighted to talk about it. And if anyone has any question, I always show up and I always lean in, and I always make sure to fight, and to anyone that ever got knocked down, and has to get back up. That's, to me, I know that metaphor way too much just by, in my own life here, Drew. I was very lucky to have survived, but my recovery continues to get better and better. And I will miss some words, and I will kind of mush two words together sometimes, but I would never miss or mush the wrong things together when it comes to my core values and being able to vote in kind of important issues that we just discussed about. And as I continue to get better and better, and I believe, and so do my doctors believe, that I'll be able to return back to being back on 100% as long time keeps going longer and longer.
Sir, I have to say one final thought as we close this thing out. Lean in. You used the term lean in. Lean in indeed. And for our audience, I want to draw the distinction between communication capability and cognitive ability. When I think about this race, I'm reminded of Stephen Hawking. In fact, without the ability to utter a single word, Stephen Hawking was considered the smartest man on earth. To our community of small business owners, it's less about how one communicates today and more about one's vision for tomorrow. What's in their heart, how will they lead, and how will they help America's small business community? Whatever the outcome of this race, sir, I want to commend you for staying the course and for sticking to your principles. And with that, thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us, and good day to you all. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor.
I thank you for the opportunity again, and I want to thank you for the very warm reception that I received. And I just want to thank you for the opportunity.